I want to talk about very fundamentally changing how you relate to yourself and actually cultivating what I'm going to be calling unconditional friendliness towards every single part of who you are, the entire spectrum of what makes up your sense of self. So our self-concept, our ego, is typically a very restrictive force, and the things that do not fit neatly into our self-concept, we typically repress them. Things that are painful, we typically repress them. Emotions that we don't like, we typically repress them, we avoid them. And this starts in childhood when the ego first really begins to form. And by the time you're an adult, you have the psychological, emotional development to begin to dig into this kind of stuff. And through digging into a lot of this kind of stuff is how you begin to very fundamentally change how you relate to yourself. One of acceptance, one of understanding, one of having an open heart towards your own suffering. So unconditional friendliness doesn't mean that you have to love every single part of yourself immediately. Because in reality, you have a lot of parts of you that you repress, you don't want to acknowledge, you don't like, etc. So that's not very realistic. Unconditional friendliness is more about allowing everything inside of you to begin to just bubble up to the surface. It's simply about creating a safe space for things to arise in. It's about being aware so that the things that are repressed can arise within your awareness. And meditation teaches you how to cultivate this unconditional friendliness towards yourself. So you don't have to hold on to anything. You don't have to try and think a good thought. You don't have to try and remove a bad thought. You don't have to try and feel a certain way. You don't have to try and remove a feeling. You don't have to try to achieve a pure state of mind. You don't have to try and prove yourself. This is about just being. This is about just allowing yourself to exist. It's so incredibly simple, but because we have so much conditioning that goes against it, this is what complicates it. The idea of just being is so bloody simple, but because we have just built up patterns that prevent us from doing that, this is where the challenge is. So we'll make a distinction here between doing and being. We're all very familiar with doing. Doing is going to work, completing a task, working on a project, going out to socialize. Doing is fine. Being is just existence. Allowing yourself to just be means just allowing yourself to exist without doing anything. A lot of the things that we do is actually an escape from being. If we look into where the motivation to do certain things comes from, it's actually to escape our existence. It's an escape from being. So by cultivating unconditional friendliness towards yourself, you allow yourself to just be. You allow the things that are inside of you to begin to bubble up. You allow feelings to just arise and pass without needing to fight against them, repress them, resist them, contract against them. Because when something arises and you don't like it, there's this contracting force that's meeting it, that's pushing it down. It's happening all the time. In the same way that breathing is happening all the time. Right now, if you actually start paying attention to the feeling of your experience, you'll actually notice that you're contracted in certain areas. You'll notice that you're not just like fully open. You'll notice that there's feelings, there's a flow of sensation in certain areas, and there's like a pushing down against this flow of sensation. There's a contraction in maybe the heart or in the gut, or like raised shoulders. There's holding patterns that the body gets stuck in, and this like habitually keeps energy down. It prevents it from simply arising fully and then just passing. See, it's so simple. Just allowing the feeling of a desire to arise and then pass. Allowing the feeling of sadness to just fully arise and pass. Allowing a thought to just fully arise and then pass without judging it, without thinking that it's bad, without needing to avoid it, without even identifying with it. It's funny how simple the concept is, but our programming just goes so deep, and this is just what makes it hard to do, what makes it hard to like really embody. So normally everything we do is to avoid being. I hope you can see this. And a good example of this is our culture, right? All the consumerism and the overemphasis on just getting more and materialism and all this stuff. Endless acquisition of just more stuff because we don't know what else to do. We just want to avoid ourselves, want to avoid our existence. I think another really good example of this is when we're actually just alone in a room with no stimulation, nothing to do, nothing to work on. And we start to just go nuts. We start to get nervous. We start to just like feel anxious. We can't just like sit there and just be okay with that. A cat can sit there and be okay with it. A frog can sit there and just be okay with it. Why can't a human just sit there and be okay with it? It's because our ego is this like just massively repressing force. We have so much conditioning built up inside of us, so much energy stored up inside of us that it creates this basically insanity almost. So not only that, but we also actually put conditions on ourselves, on our experience, certain standards on our experience, right? And then when things don't meet those standards, when things don't go according to plan, when things don't fall into how our minds wanted them to fall, we basically start attacking our experience. This creates just a lot of pain. This just creates a lot of struggle. This creates a further reason, quote unquote, to just avoid, to not simply be in existence, to not just fully embody the existence that we have right here, right now. And a lot of this stuff, just avoiding our experience, setting certain standards on it, it actually begins to close us up. See, a mind can come in and it can say like, but Lucas, I need standards because they're good, and then, if I don't have standards, then bad things will come into my life. That's not really what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is just allowing yourself to open up to existence. Allowing yourself to just open up to experience, and allowing experience to move, to flow, allowing the energy to arise and pass instead of just always being stuck and stagnant. The energy is not meant to just be stuck. It's meant to move and flow. The very health of living things depends upon the movement and flow of energy. The blood through your veins, water through rivers on the planet. The flow of emotion and feeling and sensation and desire, and the full spectrum of what can be felt needs to flow inside of your body as well. So in meditation, you work directly with the mind states that habitually lead to suffering without needing to actually wage a war against them, because typically we're viewing the parts of ourselves that we don't like, really, as like bad, even subconsciously. See, consciously we can get like, oh, that's not bad and no feeling is bad, but then our nervous system and our body, our subconscious, it's conditioned in a way where it still holds on to that belief subtly that it's bad. It's still like in there, even though we can understand at a very logical surface level that, yeah, it's not bad. It's still so programmed into us. So by practicing meditation, you actually just cultivate the unconditional friendliness over time. You just allow tendencies and desires and emotions and feelings, etc., to arise without needing to screen anything out, not needing to push anything away, and not having experienced need to measure up to an ideal or a particular standard. And it's super counterintuitive because this is extremely liberating. This is allowing things to be as they are, allowing things to just exist. It's very, very counterintuitive. You would think that by just letting things to exist and everything's going to spiral into complete chaos. It actually ends up being the opposite. Allowing things to just exist as they are, it allows you to create a deeper sense of order within yourself, a deeper sense of just groundedness within yourself. Not order as like a rigid order, but just a sense of non-reactivity almost towards what's arising. See, always trying to manage and manipulate everything is like having some dirty water with mud in it, right? Basically like some water with dirt in it, and then trying to clean the dirt by getting your hand in there and then like stirring it around even more. It just like further prevents the dirt from like just settling on the floor. It further stirs it up and just leaves the water dirty. Whereas when you just kind of leave it alone, the dirt can just like settle again. So simply just by allowing yourself to be as you are, you just allow things to arise without fixating on it, without judging it. And I really want you to dig into how you really do this subconsciously. I want you to get that it's programmed deep into you, and that you're doing it in subtle ways. Like, let's say you're doing a lot of self-help and you hear people saying that like you have to cut out this from your life and cut out that, right? It's true, there's some things that you're better off without, like porn, for example. It's a particularly good one. But if you are trying to make deep changes in your life, you're going to have the conditioning inside of you that is going to resist that naturally. So then when the desire for porn or junk food or cake arises, it's like you judge the impulse. You actually further push it down. And counterintuitively, if you want to make the change, you actually need to allow it to arise and not get your hand in there and manipulate it and interfere with it. Just allowing it to arise so you can see it and feel it. Allow the feeling of the desire to arise and then pass away. Allow the thought to arise and then pass away. Allow the feeling, the emotion, whatever it is, to arise and then pass away. Without fixating on it, without pushing it away, pulling onto it. It's like just step back. See plus feel plus just don't interfere with what's going on. Allow the muscles in your body to just relax. Allow experience to unfold on its own. Stop forcing your sense of control onto experience. Let go of needing to always control it. Super counterintuitive. Simply just by developing this unconditional friendliness to yourself and allowing things to just arise, this is the most loving way you can treat yourself. Because you're not putting any kind of restrictions on yourself about what is allowed to arise and what isn't. The full spectrum of who you are is allowed to arise, and this is extremely liberating. By allowing them to arise, they actually self-liberate. Again, I actually want to repeat that. By allowing things to arise, it self-liberates. By stepping back and allowing it to arise fully and pass away, it's a self-liberating thing. It almost just does itself. As you become more conscious as well, your own presence starts to feel wholesome in and of itself. You don't need to prove that you're good. You don't have to prove anything in order to like feel good about who you are. You don't even have to do anything to feel good about who you are. Just existing feels good. This becomes extremely, I want to say, not potent, but this becomes very natural for people at the self-transcendence level of psychological development. Spiral dynamics, stage turquoise, construct aware on ego development theory, self-transcendence on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It begins at self-actualization, but really flowers at the level past it. You also discover this self-existing sanity that lies below feeling and thought, because being identified with feeling and thought is a delusion. You're identified with the ego. It's an illusion. You are not the feeling and the thought. You're just the pure empty awareness that it all arises from. And this empty awareness permeates experience. It's not separate from anything. So it's kind of funny. You are and you aren't the thought and the feeling simultaneously. It's very paradoxical. But that's kind of how reality is. So it's very simple almost. You just start to appreciate just being awake, being lucid, being sharp, being responsive, just being open to life. There's this sort of like minimalism that goes along with this, of not always like needing excess stimulation, not needing anything to make you feel good about your existence. Just the fact that you are is enough. And this is really the birth of unconditional friendliness towards yourself. That's it for this video. If you guys want to apply to work with me, you can do that. If you're very sincere, you can find the link. I'm sure that if you really care enough to do it, you will do that. Take it easy.